Hey everyone, Silver Contrail here. This week I'm bringing you another article aftermath. This one is talking about the Create a Card matchup, and I generally want to talk about the Create a Card project because there's some really interesting news, and some of the things that I said in my article this week ended up not panning out. Of course, I don't try to say anything like I know exactly how everyone's going to vote, but one of the things I tried to assert in this article is that most likely the decks that will win are decks with past competitive history. So if a deck has previously had a format where it was the deck to beat or one of the decks to beat, it's probably going to win its matchup if the other deck is a casual strategy that maybe has no regional tops or only has regional tops and has never topped a YCS. And that was sort of the thing I was trying to point out with Dinomist and Lightsworn. And so far, that's largely been the case until the last matchup that we just had. So let's talk about X-Sabers versus the Fire King matchup, right? So Fire Kings, they had a structure deck, they have more recent support. X-Sabers really haven't seen much in the way of support for a very long time, but they were once a deck to beat. They were once like the best deck in the game. But that was a long time ago. So X-Sabers did win, but they didn't win by much. I think it was maybe like a 5-point difference between the two. This chart on here is kind of bad. You can see that Fire King got about 48% of the vote, and then X-Sabers ended up with 52% of the vote, so not really much of a split, somewhere between 4 and 5% difference. Not a huge difference between the two, very close. Then we had the Photon versus Mermail matchup, and I said forever, as much as I liked the Photon deck, and I talked about it last week, that look, Mermails are probably going to win this. This actually wasn't that close. I think it ended up being 10,000 votes to 6,500 votes. That's a pretty big difference. I mean, very significant difference. So Photon, very favorable. Mermail, not so favorable. And that kind of changes my perspective because, again, Mermail is a deck that was once the deck to beat. It has a competitive history. It's had continuous new cards in the way that there's more water cards that exist, and almost every water card with a discard effect is theoretically Mermail support, or at least Atlantean support by proxy. So the next matchup we have coming up is Frogs versus TG, and I would say, look, Frog is the one, right? Frog has a past competitive history. We've seen that maybe that's not the only thing that matters, that a big enough fan base can sway one way or the other the results. But I'm gonna go out here and speculate that Frogs are probably still gonna win, just based on the social media posts that I've seen, just based off people being like, "Look, we need Frogs are adorable, Frogs are cute, we need more Frogs in our lives." So I'm gonna speculate that I think Frogs are gonna win here, but who knows? Fortune Lady versus Hazy Flame. This is not much of a matchup. I think Fortune Ladies are gonna take that easily. Unfortunately, Hazies are probably, although I'm not super up to date on Cyber Angels, Hazies might actually be the single worst deck on this entire list. I'm not joking. It is so bad. It's a deck with no win condition. All the monsters suck. It's terrible. And then we're gonna have Sylvans versus Cyber Angels. I think Sylvans might pull this one out just because they're a fan favorite. Also plants. And then, of course, the Lightsworn versus Dinomist, which is what my article was on, which I think Lightsworn will win because of the nostalgia vote. But there is a huge number of people who are sort of rooting for Dinomist. I wrote a Dinomist deck list in here, and then I also did a Lightsworn deck list, which if you didn't check out, you should look at it because it plays 3 Judgment Dragon, because I couldn't resist, right? So this is much more of an old school... an old skill build of, well, maybe it has Judgment Dragon in here. Where's my Judgment Dragon at? Oh, it looks like it got thrown into the spells. That happens sometimes. We'll try to get that fixed. So yeah. Let me switch over real quick. We're gonna pull up the Yu-Gi-Oh capture. Okay, here we go. So this build is, I think, I mean, maybe made a few changes here, which is fine. I really do like the idea of playing Judgment Dragon. just in general. I think it's a cool card to sort of follow up with like a Dark Ruler No More, or even just to use it as like an extra body. It's not really that difficult to set up these days because you can play so many really good Lightsworn monsters, right? You can play like your Lumina, your Felis or Felis. I don't really know how to pronounce this. Lila, Raiden, and Wolf. Plus the fact that you have a Link, a Synchro, and an Xyz to match names into your graveyard. It's pretty easy to set up the conditions for Judgment Dragon. What makes this card kind of nutty is Starlight Cipher. So, Cipher, if I can get my display to work. There we go. Okay, cool. If I can get my... if I can get this to work at all. So, Cipher is actually pretty crazy. In the sense that you can banish it from your graveyard to sort of add Judgment Dragon right back to your hand. It takes the role that Eclipse Wyvern used to have, but you do need to actually mill Judgment Dragon or somehow get it into the graveyard. That's where like playing 3 copies comes in. You really need to play 3 copies of Judgment Dragon in order to see it reliably, and then to also abuse it with Cipher. You can do like some pretty crazy stuff with Judgment Dragon too with Cipher. Like you can special summon it, nuke the field. If they stop you, just banish Cipher, add it back to your hand, summon it again, right? There's no restriction on how many times you can summon Judgment Dragon or how many times you can activate its effect. So it becomes a really fun, just this huge nuke that you can just drop on the board. The nice thing is that this deck is very straightforward, which if you're looking for a deck that doesn't have a billion different like combo paths to go off on, this isn't that bad. I sort of like the Danger Engine here. It doesn't really need to be in here. I think it just plays really well with the Shadows, and having some dark monsters to set up, of course, your White Dragon Wyvern Burster and Black Dragon Collapse Serpent, which again are kind of important. Kind of nice cards to have, even if you're just using them for Lake summons. And then there's the old Clown Blade trick, right? Which is where you play Perform by Trick Clown and Thousand Blades. Both cards, I think, are solid. They make your rank 4s. They're not, amazing by any stretch. But they work pretty well in a deck that's going to be, 1, milling a lot of cards, and 2, have really good access and a lot of really good reasons to play Curious. Being able to play Curious is awesome in this deck because, again, it's a name for Judgment Dragon, and it sets up all your cards, and it also activates very easily. Like the effect to like trigger its additional effect is almost always readily available for you. And you've got a lot of good extra deck options. I think maybe I might be leaning a little too hard on the Shadow extra deck, but it's okay. It's fun. I would not consider this a competitive deck necessarily, but you can steal wins on a casual level, which honestly for this deck right now, that's maybe the best that it can hope for, unfortunately. Especially without Fairy Tale Snow. So what does this deck need? I sort of talked about like maybe a card like, to me in my mind, I'm thinking of a card like Infernoid Decatron. Some kind of card that you summon it and it sends a card from your deck to the graveyard. Like if you can imagine a level 4 like that you could replace Lila with, for example, and it says, when this card is summoned, you can send a Lightsworn monster from your deck to the graveyard. And maybe it has a built-in special summon effect too. Maybe it has a way to search Judgment Dragon. I know that's asking for a lot, and I'm not saying it needs to have all of those things, but I think as a baseline, in Armageddon Knight or Inferno Decatron, a themed monster that's like summon this card, send a Lightsworn, right? That's going to land you 3 names essentially. If you make Minerva, that's going to land you 3 names for Judgment Dragon right there, which is pretty good. Like that's already pretty solid. Like I think people underestimate just how good Judgment Dragon can be. The problem is you've got to play all these relatively mediocre cards in order to get it onto the field, right? Like you've got to sort of like hope that you don't just brick into like a bunch of your cards that you can't normal summon, which there are many, which is another reason why I like the dangers. But I think with one really good card, this deck could be pretty solid, or at least okay. I don't know about competitive, but I think what maybe is driving that is the fact that like Charge of the Light Brigade is really stupid. Like, this card is dumb. It's so good. And Solar Recharge is also really stupid good. So there's a lot of fantastic cards here. The more Lightsworns you can play that are good, that help you actually like make rank 4s, the better, because then you're playing more cards you can search with this, more cards you can discard to draw with this, more cards you can mill with this and draw cards, and it's great. So yeah, that's about it. Just real quick kind of recap of what's going on with the Create a Card project and what happened with my article last week, and also sort of saying like, hey, I was wrong that like if a deck has a past competitive history, it might not always win. And so that's it for me. Thank you for watching, and until next time then.